From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And ahead today from the Center for Sorghum Improvement here at K-State, Sarah Sexton-Bowser, along with the K-State dietitian Kelly Whitehair, will talk about the university's efforts to introduce sorghum-based foods into the residence hall menus for students. This new initiative, they'll tell us, intends to educate students about sorghum as a food grain. Then Sarah Moyer talks with K-State's Jim Nelssen about the upcoming Swine Day at K-State, set for November the 16th here on the campus. It'll highlight research on emerging disease challenges in pork production and transitioning to loose housing for gestating sows. And later, K-State's Charlie Lee talks about preventing woodpecker damage to homes. All coming up on Agriculture Today.
With the shortage of primary care physicians, especially in rural areas, health education and disease prevention are vital. K-State research and extension programs address quality of life, personal development, and health behaviors across all life stages of all social economic groups. To learn more about health education, one of K-State Research and Extension's 5 grand challenges, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
We talk many times about the prospect of using grain sorghum in various ways beyond just as a feed grain for our livestock. And here's another development that's of interest along this line. It's happening here on the Kansas State University campus, and we've 2 individuals from the university here to share more about what is going on with sorghum. Sarah Sexton-Bowser is back with us. She's the managing director of the Center for Sorghum Improvement here at K-State. And along with her is a dietitian from the Housing and Dining Services here at the university, Kelly Whitehair. Before we have Kelly tell more about how sorghum is being incorporated into the dining opportunities for students here at K-State, Sarah, this is very much a big interest in regard to expanding sorghum's utility, right?
Certainly, Eric. We've had the conversation time and time again that our priorities are oriented towards enhancing sorghum, not only from a productivity side on the agronomic infield, but also from a value and demand. And so what are the specific products or the specific market streams that we need to orient towards to make sure that the farm gate not only has productivity, but also profitability for sorghum farmers?
And when you look broadly at sorghum as a foodstuff, that market's out there, but it's been something of a niche market up to this point, has it not?
Well, certainly. So first and foremost, we know globally sorghum is a staple food. And we even have unique efforts here at K-State to leverage USAID and international partnerships to advance sorghum from a foodstuff. And then domestically, there's certainly been an appreciation for sorghum as an ancient grain and means some of the other consumer priorities that we have. But we haven't leveraged down and truly focused in on how do we make sorghum the locally grown ancient grain that is fulfilling a lot of our consumer demand to have a known ancient grain backstory to their food at their food table.
So for the center's part, you're looking for opportunity to promote that theme then, right?
Yes, and to be a conduit as well. How do we use our known capacity as a sorghum research institution to leverage in and make sure that we are truly being systematic about helping develop and facilitate sorghum markets specific in a number of areas, but today's conversation to the food platform.
So how did you become in conversation with Kelly and her team here at Housing and Dining Services toward this end?
Well, sometimes you get really excited about all these projects, and then you step back and you realize you've kind of missed the opportunity right in front of your nose. And even more, you don't even know those prime ready partners, the partnership that we have with Kelly. So here at K-State, we have Kansas sorghum farmers fully vested in our work. We have sorghum research capacity orienting towards, but we also have students that are in their formative consumer years that are eating here in K-State each and every day. And we just asked a simple question, is sorghum on the menu at K-State Food Service? And asking that question led to the connection with Kelly.
Well, Kelly, let you pick it up from here. And to explain, as a dietitian, you oversee what's on the plate, quite literally for students here at K-State within the residential housing, right?
Yes, I do. I do all the menu writing. And it's a really fun job because you get to introduce a lot of new things, and sorghum was one of those. It kind of fell into our lap, honestly, accidentally. I was lucky enough to be invited by the bakery science department to be a panelist on a, I guess you'd call it a bakery development project that some of their students were doing, and the ingredient of the year was sorghum. So they were introducing a lot of new bakery products to me that I'd never had that utilized sorghum as an ingredient, and I thought, well, why the heck aren't we doing this on campus in our dining centers? So I took that back, and we started to develop slowly with just 1 or 2 recipes, and just kind of taken off from there. And then luckily, Sarah reached out, and we thought, this needs to be a partnership because housing and dining isn't just about putting food on the table. It's all about community and campus family as well as nutrition and education, too.
So you put out a dish or two, as it were, to students. What were those? Do you recall initially?
The very first one we developed was a sorghum pilaf. So something we thought they were already familiar with rice pilaf. Let's just try a similar recipe and sub sorghum in. It went over fine, but their question was, what is sorghum? And so then we said, well, have you heard of Milo? And they said, no, which blew my mind, of course. So we're realizing this is a great opportunity because not only are we educating them on new ancient grains that they can consume, but we can also pull in our partners on campus to educate them a little bit more about the agriculture behind it and some of the research happening on campus.
So how did that manifest itself in terms of the education side of it?
Well, I would say on our side of it, from the dining side, these questions, when students are like, what are you talking about? What is sorghum? We have an initiative in the dining centers currently called Cultivate You. It's a new program we have that's got 3 tiers, I would say. So it's got wellness, which is including that nutritional side of things. It's got community, and then it's got sustainability. And sorghum honestly fits right in there perfectly for all of those because I can talk about the whole grains and the ancient grains being on their plate. We're pulling in community because it's a campus-wide project. It's also sustainable because it's very local and within our own state. So it just fit right in there as like that star product for our program, to be honest.
And you've clearly tried various entrees from here forward, have you not?
Yes. We've only introduced, I think, 3 this semester because we worked so far out. But next semester there'll be a ton because they're all being developed this semester. We also had 2 students that were on board with us through the summer that worked with sorghum and helped develop some of those recipes, too, that are in the dietetics program.
But beyond the educational side of it, the general response of students from the palate point of view, it's been favorable. It apparently's been good.
Yes, very much so. I think they realize it's not really something different. It's just like all the other grains. We've just got to figure out how to get them to accept those other grains so that they can have some more wholesome food on their plate.
How can the center, through these experiences, Sarah, leverage this development?
Well, a lot of what we're doing is a storytelling aspect. Kelly brought up a very pertinent point. You would think that students at K-State would know what sorghum is, right? We have so many efforts energized and oriented towards advancing the crop and engaging end users, both current and prospective end users. You would think that'd be a ready-made, and it's not. And so conversations like what Kelly and I are having with you today and utilizing other message and communication platforms to really articulate and take what we're integrating from a programmatic standpoint and what Kelly's efforts are from an actual deployment of food development. And she's doing it this semester, but when you talk with Kelly, she's excited to continue and double down on this effort. And so this is the start of a continuing and evolving platform to make a consumer influence and consumer branding. So this is just a way to really ground what we do. Sometimes when we talk about crop improvement, farmers out there know this very well is a long-term pipeline, and we have a lot of exciting stuff in that pipeline, but what can we deliver and talk about today? That's also important to give individuals a way to bite on to, literally and figuratively bite on to what sorghum is and what sorghum can do from a farmer to a consumer level.
Kelly, are you having conversations with peers in your profession about the potential of sorghum?
Yes, actually, I have. I feel like I'm always the one introducing it, though, to be honest. I've been lucky enough to travel recently with some work projects, and we're using other grains, and every time I get there, I say, well, where's the sorghum? So I'm realizing I'm becoming the, sorghum queen for the dining centers. Anytime we're developing a new recipe, I'm automatically saying, was there any way we can tweak that and bring sorghum into it instead? Because why not use something that's much more local and accessible to us? We're also thinking about where do we get away from just this whole grain sorghum that's a center of the plate thing, and how can we start working with it in our bakeries as well, because we are from scratch baking operations. So we've got all these flour options too that we can start to play with a little bit more.
And do you plan to ramp up your efforts to further educate the students about what's on their plate in regard to sorghum-based products?
Definitely. We have this Cultivate You program, which does have a pretty strong educational component to it. And we have Chef Jeffrey Maiden, who's working really closely with the students, and each month he does like a themed presentation. So we've already got one planned for the spring that will focus on all of our local products, and we now have another one to add. In the past it would have been Call Hall and our meats from Weber, and now we can pull in sorghum from Kansas as well on that, and maybe even pull in some farmers and some of our vendors that supply that local sorghum and get them in there too to interact with the students.
So it's a positive move forward, it sounds.
Definitely.
Yeah. From the prospect of the center and its mission, this is right up your alley, isn't it, Sarah?
It certainly is. When we talk about making real demand and value-oriented outcomes, these are part of the efforts that orient towards the overall long-term deliverables.
And if we have, say, a dietitian listening out there or somebody involved, say, with a school system that might be willing to explore this at the public school level, so forth, would like to know more about what's happened here at K-State along this line, either of you are available to talk that over with them, presumably.
Of course. And if they've got ideas for how to utilize it on the menu, share them with us as well.
And a good contact point would be the center itself, would it not, Sarah?
Certainly the center, and so you can find my contact information via K-State, or it's also Sarah with an H and ANN at KSU.edu, but certainly willing to facilitate, because a lot of what we can do in the center is connect the suppliers. So who is producing the flour, Kansas-grown, manufactured sorghum flours out there? We can be a conduit to make those connections as well.
Well, it certainly is a progressive story in the cause of grain sorghum and the cause of good nutrition, and everybody's a winner along that line. So thanks to the both of you for coming over and telling us what's happened here at K-State. Appreciate your time, Kelly. Sarah?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Joining Sarah Sexton-Bowser, who's the managing director of the Center for Sorghum Improvement here at K-State, a dietitian with the Housing and Dining Services here at the university, Kelly Whitehair. And once again, Housing and Dining at K-State through the Residence Hall Nutrition Program, introducing sorghum-based foods into that program successfully, and with hope for more of that here in the near future here at K-State. You're listening to Agriculture Today, and we'll return after this break over the K-State Radio Network. Please stay with us.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. I'm Sarah Moyer, here excited for the 2017 KSU Swine Day. Kansas pork producers market approximately 1.5 million pigs, making it an important part of the livestock landscape here in the state. Across the way to help tell us more is K-State swine specialist Jim Nelssen. Good to have you on, Jim.
Thank you, Sarah. We're excited about the 2017 K-State Swine Industry Day.
And this is an annual highlight for the Animal Science Department and, of course, the swine specialists within there. Tell us about the need-to-know information regarding time, date, location, agenda.
Yes, Sarah, Swine Industry Day has traditionally been in the Alumni Center. It's on Thursday, November 16th, and we've got an exciting program. It starts actually, Sarah, at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we've just been placing in the foyer of the Alumni Center all the exhibitors. We've got 35 industry representatives and companies that represent from equipment to pharmaceuticals to breeding stock for the swine industry, and that starts at 8 o'clock. The formal program begins at 9:15, and Dr. Odie, our department head that's stepping down, is giving his last welcome at Swine Industry Day, and then, as you mentioned, we lead right into the technology or the knowledge section of the Swine Industry Day.
And that knowledge section is a special part of this day and the reason some people come out to it. Will you give an example of what you'll be talking about as an update to the research that's been going on?
Well, sir, as you know, we break it into small sections or 15-minute sections in the morning, given the latest applied research for Kansas State University. Specifically, to answer your question, an area that our research team or my research team is focused on is the whole antibiotic-free production of pork. And we know that goes across species, but that's an area that consumers want, that's been pushed very hard by our government to reduce the use of feed-grade antibiotics in swine feeding. And so during my 15-minute presentation, Sarah, I'll focus in on the latest breaking news that we've got on new technologies, and actually the area that's the most exciting to me, if I could elaborate on that. Last year I talked about trace minerals being able to replace antibiotics. Companies have went in and extracted oils from different fruits called essential oils. You're aware of that from your classes. And you know very well that those oils have antimicrobial properties. We've now fed that back to pigs and found that we found natural compounds that we'll be releasing at Swine Day that actually have nearly as good effect as antibiotics in feeding. So, Sarah, as you'd expect, we're very excited about that, and we think it's promising, and hopefully the audience finds it very interesting and applicable to their operation.
Exciting news there, and definitely want people to come check that out and learn more about it. There have been more than 50 experiments that have been conducted in the last year regarding swine research and some of these applied swine projects. So, Jim, what are some other highlights, or what other research projects can people expect to hear about?
You know, we've got the traditional swine feeding, and that's a lot of the 50 projects that you mentioned. Those go from salt levels for nursery pigs all the way to particle size for grains, gestation feeding patterns for sows. There's a gamut. If there's a topic that's interesting to a swine producer or allied industry friend from across not only Kansas but the Midwest, it'll be presented, in my opinion, during that morning session. And at the end of the session, we're going to honor a longtime leader of the Kansas swine industry. A mentor of mine, Dr. Steve Henry, will be honored right before lunch. He's famous throughout the state, and truly every agency that ever calls me knows Dr. Henry, and everyone on campus and every producer knows who he is. And he's retiring the end of October this year. We're going to honor him and then move right into our traditional pork lunch, which is always a highlight for many of our students here at Kansas State University.
How appropriate, and students can attend this event with no charge if they are pre-registered. We'll get to some of those registration details in a moment, but as you mentioned, lunch will be going on and the trade show will continue, and following that, there is another update. Tell us about what that update focuses on.
You know, our friends in the vet school always are doing outstanding research, and we started 4 or 5 years ago. Actually, I had Bob Rowland on 4 or 5 years ago, and he just gave an enlightening speech on a disease that's relevant in the swine industry, PRRS, and many operations were challenged with that. Now it's branched out to emerging diseases in the swine industry. We always have some new diseases on the horizon that they'll be sharing with us, and going all the way down to viral survival in feeds. PED virus a few years back was speculated, never totally proven to be in feed, but it was speculated on behalf of Kansas State, and so that caused quite a stir on how do we eradicate or eliminate viruses from feed, and then also understanding what effect all these compounds have within the gut, which is called the microbiome or the microbiology within the intestinal tract of the pig. And so that actually starts at 1:30. That's an hour session, and I always enjoy it, sitting there listening to the basic research and the great science that those folks in the vet school share with us for the last 4 or 5 years.
Excellent. Then there is one more session and presentation prior to some question and answer time, and it relates to meeting consumer demands and some mandates that the swine industry is dealing with. Would you like to elaborate on what to expect there?
Well, you know, we've been under challenge, as you mentioned, to eliminate the use of gestation stalls for a number of years in the swine industry. Many production systems have used different approaches. Some have publicly announced that they're going to eradicate or eliminate the use of gestation stalls by a certain date. Others have just transitioned their operations over time from stalls to what we call loose housing, pen gestation, these type facilities where the animals have a pen rather than in an individual stall. And we've asked one of our former students, and I think it's enlightening to say that. Dr. Hyatt Frobose, that got his Ph.D. with Dr. Dwayne Davis and myself here at Kansas State, a native of Ohio, come back and talk about the transition to loose housing and gestation systems. And Hyatt now works for Gestal, an international company, initially based out of Canada, and he has a wealth of knowledge and works with the industry every single day, figuring out how to transition and manage these animals as we move them, as I mentioned earlier, from a gestation stall to a pen or loose housing situation. And so I think our producers will enjoy that. Allied industry are becoming used to it, and it's something that we, as we transition to, we want to share the latest and the newest finding that Hyatt and his company, or Dr. Frobose, I should say, has found in commercial swine production.
A neat K-State connection coming back to participate in this 2017 KSU Swine Day. And if folks' questions haven't been answered or if more have been provoked during the day, there is some set-aside time for question and answer and also, notably, some K-State ice cream, correct?
Absolutely, and many people say that's the highlight of the day. After the session, we always try to stay around and have a reception, open house, friendly visitation. Many times the producers learn more from each other than from the specialists that are at the program, and so we allow that time, and in the meantime, we have K-State Call Hall ice cream, as it's called. And I've already had students requesting as we make the final plans which flavor to have. So we hope that people make the time away from their operation that day, come in, enjoy some K-State hospitality, enjoy the program, the honoring of Dr. Steve Henry, the meal, and then the afternoon program followed, as you mentioned, by the Call Hall ice cream.
And if folks are convinced to attend, how do they go about registering?
You can register a number of ways. Probably the easiest way, and for the reduced price, by November 9th, it's $25 to register, and they can register at www.ksuswine.org, KSUSwine, all one word, .org. And if they want to register, we will have walk-in registration. It's higher. It's $35 if they just want to show up the day of Swine Day. Another way they can register is simply to call Lois Schreiner. She's our events coordinator, a new title that she's recently got in animal science. Lois Schreiner's phone number is 785-532-1267. I'll repeat, 785-532-1267 if they prefer to call. But as I mentioned, the easiest way to register, and the early registration ends November 9th, and that's on the website.
Once again, $25 if you do register by November 9th. And you can also find this information online at ksuswine.org, the schedule uploaded there in addition to the registration information. Well, it's been great to have you on, Jim, talking about this 2017 KSU Swine Day.
Thanks for the opportunity, sir. I truly enjoyed it.
Once again, that was K-State swine specialist Jim Nelssen talking about the annual highlight for swine researchers and hopefully the producers here in the state of Kansas and the region. The date, once again, for this event being Thursday, November 16th at the K-State Alumni Center. As mentioned, the trade show begins around 8 a.m. and the day will wrap up around 4 p.m. So come on out, and once again, for more information, visit ksuswine.org. If you're unable to attend the Swine Day this year, you will later be able to look online at that ksuswine.org website and view uploaded presentations from the event. I'm Sarah Moyer, and we'll be back in a moment after this break. Eric will be back with today's agricultural news headlines. Mike Brook will have this week's edition of Milk Lines and more. Stay tuned here on the K-State Radio Network.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
we're back now on this Agriculture Today. And next up for you, our weekly wildlife segment. Charlie Lee is aboard once again, wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension. Charlie, following up on our conversation last week about the pileated woodpecker, want to examine in more detail general woodpecker damage, the common species we see here in Kansas, and there's a study that addresses this. But the other types of woodpeckers we normally see in this state?
Well, some of the more common ones that I get questions about would include the hairy woodpecker, downy woodpecker, the northern flicker, perhaps the yellow-bellied sapsucker, although that's more on ornamental or on trees, and the red-bellied woodpecker. So 4 of those would be fairly common and the most common in damaging the homes here in Kansas. You know, they're a fascinating bird, but some people are really frustrated when they try to understand why they're drumming or excavating openings into the side of their homes.
And that's the main issue at hand here, that is that they are chipping away at particularly wood siding?
Well, there's several types of damage that they can do, but most common it is in wood siding. You know, of the 3 types of complaints that I get on homes, the drumming holes would be those that might occur in something of siding other than in wood. Sometimes that's on aluminum, sometimes it's on gutters or downspouts, sometimes it's on the trim and fascia boards, but most of the time it's on metal downspouts, gutters, or even on chimneys or chimney vent covers. That drumming is really more annoying than damaging, but occasionally you do get some damage, denting, and very rarely you get some holes very small holes in that aluminum siding. So typically those holes in the wood part of the siding from drumming can be maybe as much as an inch across, but they're usually very shallow. Those drumming holes are typically when your woodpeckers are trying to establish some sort of territory or breeding behavior. They're signifying that they're in that particular area, the territory is occupied, or perhaps that they're looking for a mate. Other type of damage would be roosting and nesting holes. Those are most often in homes that are in close proximity to woodlands, and typically those homes that have a natural wood or dark-colored stain on them. The siding of those homes can be clapboards, board and batten, tongue and groove siding, and occasionally composite wood or the old masonite type siding. When they begin to drill in nesting or roosting holes, they usually make several attempts before they end up with an excavation. So they may start several and then quit and move to a different site, hoping to find the ideal location on the house. They first go through the outer siding, then they go through the sheeting and plywood layers, and then directly into the insulation. And once they're into the insulation, that's where the nesting and roosting area is hollowed out. Occasionally they'll go through into the drywall, but most of the time it's just into the insulation. And the proximity of that house to other holes and trees nearby is also important. Some people speculate that there's too few trees nearby for them to excavate, drill holes into woodlands, and then some homes are made of very soft wood, which perhaps insects are occupying. So those are been the reasons that been speculated that woodpeckers will excavate holes. And of those, looking for insects or foraging seems to be one that doesn't have a lot of credibility. Of all of the homes that I've looked at here in Kansas that have woodpecker damage, I can't think of any where it was apparent that the woodpeckers were after insects. Although in other states, insects such as carpenter bees and leafcutter bees and even bagworms are on the sides of homes, and woodpeckers have been documented at going after those. I've not noticed that here in Kansas.
Now, there has been in recent times a study, actually in another state, but applicable to our situation here, that tried to get at this question, why woodpeckers select specific homes to work on as opposed to others.
Yeah, and one of the conclusions of that study was that grooved plywood, wood shakes, tongue and groove and board and batten sidings should be avoided at all sites that were in lightly to heavily wooded areas, as those sidings are more prone to woodpecker damage. They also indicated that stain sealants, especially those that are earth-toned, should be avoided, and the best approach would be use some sort of a paint of a different color than earth-toned or natural colored stain. And in conclusion, they said that houses with wood siding covered with earth-toned stains experienced 97% of the woodpecker damage on that particular study, which was done in New York. In that study, they found about 34% of the homes had some sort of woodpecker damage on them, and those that try to blend in with the natural features were the most prone to have damage.
So when one considers what can be done about deterring woodpecker damage, outside of not using a natural stain that would attract woodpeckers on their wood siding, what else can be done?
Well, you need to try to deter them. And there's some tactile deterrents that are a sticky paste that can be used. I don't particularly like those, although they're registered. They actually damage the bird's feathers, sometimes lead to an early death of the bird. The best thing is some sort of a visual deterrent, aluminum foil strips or reflective tape that hangs down and moves within the wind over the openings of that the woodpecker has drilled into the home seem to be most efficient. There are some sound deterrents, distress calls that are played, or even netting that's applied in some areas. But most of the time we can solve these problems with visual deterrents if they're applied early on in the process. At the first time woodpeckers are starting to drill into the side of your home, you need to take steps immediately to put some sort of a visual deterrent in place, and then keep that in place even if the woodpecker moves to a different side of the home, so that they move on and find a different place to excavate.
Once more, that is the nature of woodpecker damage to homes and some things to consider to discourage that woodpecker from creating those holes. Charlie, thanks for the look at this today. He's a wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension, Charlie Lee. Our time's away for today. Thanks to you for listening in. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.